Welcome to Witchy Business, hosted by me, Emily.
And me, Anna. This is your weekly dose of friendly business chat with a witchy flair.
Through these personal and vulnerable conversations, we share our business journey with you,
highlighting the links to our overall growth journey in the hopes to make you feel more supported as you share your magic.
This episode is sponsored by Plan Her, a timeless and undated planner and journal created to help witches stay organised while in flow.
We especially love the pages for new moon manifestations and full moon reflections.
For additional support on how to harness the energy of the moon while working on your business,
subscribe to our Substack, your link in our show notes.
So this episode is all about deconstructing our relationship to work. And for both of us having similar backgrounds, we really go into what it's like to be working in a kind of hustle culture background, essentially. And the first half of this episode does turn into a little bit of a rant, but then we catch ourselves, bring it back. But really, we're sharing honestly and openly our experience and how we've gone from being in that environment to now running our businesses in a completely different way, what that journey looks like for us, and everything that has kind of come up along the way. So we hope that this resonates with you and that you can take something from this if you relate to coming from a hustle culture background or not. Maybe, you still have similar thought patterns and behaviors that you wish you could not do anymore. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
Hello, and welcome to our second episode of Witchy Business. If you're watching us, you can probably tell that we've just recorded this second ep straight after the first one because we were really in a chatty mood, so we figured we should just keep going. So this week we wanted to talk about deconstructing our relationship to work, because we touched on that in the first episode. About how our background is in PR and marketing. We worked in luxury hotels, we worked in agencies, and it was just a very masculine, pushy, perfection-driven environment. And we've been on quite the journey deconstructing our relationship to work. So yeah, that's us this week.
So much to say on this topic.
Yep. Yeah, so much to say. Where should we start? So maybe let's just share a little bit more about what it's like working in an agency, what our jobs were in agencies, just so people get a bit of a feel for it. Yeah. Do you want to start? Shall I start?
You go. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think it's probably easier to just start from the beginning. I actually started out in the fashion industry, and I interned quite a bit when I first moved to London straight after uni. And then my first paid job was in fashion PR, and it was really, the internships were like even just the introduction to that kind of environment where everything it needs to be perfect, and there's so many deadlines, you're managing multiple things at once. And then I moved into advertising agencies, creating content, social media, and that was like, whoa. But I didn't realize it at the time, though. That's the thing, I kind of was just used to this fast-paced world, and I was ready for it. I was young, I think also when you're younger as well, you're like, you have more energy, but also you're like super hungry for the work and the career and the ambition, and that's not to say that I'm not anymore. It's just, I know myself more and I know my body more. Whereas at the time I kind of just threw myself into this environment, and the the types of work that you do is the deadlines, you could have like a week to do something that's like, realistically you need much longer than that. And the deadlines were tight, there was multiple projects, the clients are fussy, and it's just a lot. I don't even know how to articulate it other than it was chaotic, and you just roll with it. And so my days were spent working from 7 or 8 in the morning to 8-9 at night, and then taking that work home and carrying on working from home, or going to the pub with your work friends, because you don't have time to fit other friends in, because they all are probably either doing the same thing with their works, or they're doing their own thing. So it becomes this kind of hamster wheel or treadmill of work, drinking, more work, and on the weekends as well. And there's never a break. I never took a sick day, because either I felt like I didn't have time to have a sick day, or I didn't get sick because I was just, my nervous system was in this constant state of survival mode, fight or flight. So I was just pushing. And then, that feeling where you go on holiday and you get sick, that's because, that's because your nervous system is then having a break, it's regulating, and then it lets all of this in. And I didn't realize that at the time. I was part of this culture that was like, oh haha, I'm going on holiday and I'm probably going to be sick, like that's just the way it is.
Normal. It's just what everybody goes through. So, and also being aware that that's toxic and dangerous and unhealthy, you're kind of like, okay, then what do I do with that information? So honestly, just hearing you talk about it and thinking about it, I'm not comfortable in my body. I've got like the flight reaction where I just want to run away. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm like, it's just crazy how I can still feel it so much.
But do you feel like at the same, like at the time because I genuinely, I didn't even think that there was another way to do work. I felt like that this is it.
It's, well, if you want to get ahead, which we both really did, that's the only way to do it. And it's not about like changing how to do it, it's about learning how to cope with it better. And then even like healthy things like exercise, eating healthy, yoga, meditation become coping mechanisms, become tools to bypass what you're actually feeling, because you don't have time to feel what you're feeling. There's just no space for it. And so it's kind of like, oh, well, start your day with 20-minute meditation, and that way you'll be more able to cope with the stress. How about we create an environment that's less stressful? Because it can be just as productive, but it's such a big shift that needs to happen for that to occur. And I mean, when you were talking about like working in fashion and like perfectionism, it's just like that's the standard. And I think for people who work in the industry, they completely understand it. But when you work in an agency and you're working for clients, the base level that is acceptable is perfection, is perfectly meeting what they're expecting. But what you deliver most of the time is above what your client expects, because that's your role as an agency, because otherwise they'll just employ a designer, or they'll have an intern that they'll suck the life out of for 6 months and get them to do the design and all the things to just like execute. Your role working in an agency is being like, okay, we can execute everything that you want, but this is all the extra stuff that we could also do, and this is the best price for you, and there's all that, exceeding expectations is pretty much what you're expected to do. So the standard is incredibly high all the time, and there's no room for, can we squeeze in 5 extra pieces of designs today, because you look at your board and there's no designer that's free. And then as a project manager, you end up like bribing designers, to be like, can you do an extra hour of work today? And I'll pay you a drink, or I'll get you a coffee, or,
Yeah.
I have this memory of like getting into work with like a tray of coffee, and everyone's like, oh no, what does she want? You're like,
Yeah.
and then like we worked in luxury hotels. So
Yeah.
it's just, you think about it, marketing and PR, they're industries where you're constantly working, your brain is constantly thinking ahead. We spoke about that, like how you're working on the deadline that was due yesterday, but at the same time, you're planning the campaign in a year's time. And there's that, but there's also, you're out on the weekend, you pick up a brunch menu. How many times have you checked like the typo of the brunch menu, and then what it looks like, the layout, and how easy it is to read, and how well they explain like their campaign, their promotion, and all of their stuff. And you take photos, you email them to yourself, you suddenly have an idea for, oh, this works for this campaign or that one. And so you do that kind of work. In PR, like you open anything, like a magazine, a book, or a blog. Can't believe I started with magazine. Like, what year is this? No, you open an Instagram post and you're like, oh, there's that blogger. They would suit our brand so well. Like, we need to find a way to get in touch with them. And like you said, your colleagues are your friends. So you're at the brunch table and you're like, oh, how cool would it be if we like get them in? What do you reckon? And all of that. So you work on that level, and then you add that you work for a hotel, which is a business that never closes. There is no like opening hours. It is 24/7. Christmas, New Year's, there's no breaks. There's no public holidays, none of that. And then you add luxury to that, where it's just, again, the standard is insanely high.
Yeah.
Like I just had a flashback of, we did a whole photo shoot for like 3 days, and then we sent the photos for approval and we got in trouble. And I had a meeting with my GM kind of trouble, because one of the photos, the chef had a piece of oyster under his nail.
Oh,
He had just chucked the oyster. So, yeah. But it looked dirty. And it was all about like, how did you put that forward? Like, you should have seen it. And I'm just like, there's 300 photos. And,
yeah, that is the ultimate perfection. Like, you're so right. Like, when I worked in agency, I worked for one of my clients was a major supermarket brand, and the shoots that we would do were this similar to that. Everything had to be perfect, but to the point where we were the content that we were doing was like recipe content, so like mainly for social media, for website, like digital content, and all of the ingredients had to be exact. And I remember one time we made a dish, and it was a film, so we did the whole video shoot, and then we took all the stills afterwards. But the people who had done the recipe, the cooking, had used too much of the ingredients, so it wasn't a serving size. And so the client was on shoot. The client always comes on shoot, and was like, no, we can't, we need to do this whole thing again. This had taken like 3 hours. We need to do this whole thing again, because we can't promote something that isn't the serving size, because people won't, it's all to do with like what you're promoting. And so I can imagine for that shoot that you were talking about, the idea is like, who's going to want to eat somewhere where someone's got dirty fingernails? Like,
yeah. And it sounds ridiculous, like what oh, your biggest stress was that there's something under the fingernail. It's like, mate, you don't understand. It's like it's like a whole day's work of, yeah. And it's just,
yeah. And I think also, like, when we talk about this, like, I think it's also good to note that we now, like where we are now in our lives and in our business, we mentioned last episode was we try and create more ease and flow into our lives and our business. But at the time of us being in agency and hotels and this, I guess let's just call it like hustle culture environment, we like no one would know that we were stressed. Like our bodies were feeling that effects, but no one would know. Like I like this kind of analogy of a swan where you're just gliding through with ease, and underneath you're like, yeah, if anyone's watching us, just like doing the actions. But that really is what it is. It's, you know, no one would know that we were finding that we were stressed, or and we like I probably didn't even know that in the early stages of my career. I didn't know that I was stressed. I just thought
I definitely knew that I was overly stressed.
Yeah.
But like we said before, like that's just, well, you work in a stressful industry and that's what it is. And you are actually praised for being, like, I remember being praised for, because I'd be like, oh, but we need to think about this, and we need to think about this, and we need to think about this, and we need, you know, like, and my boss would be like, that's why I love working with you, because you like overly stress about every detail, so when we're at it, it's perfect. And you're like, now I'm like, did anybody just like, you know, come and see me and was like, oh, maybe you could do like a little less? Or I remember going to this like training for time management, also bullshit, like time management, you know. And them telling me that basically if I was doing overtimes because I didn't manage my time properly. I was like, have you seen my workload? Like, there's just, and the amount of unexpected stuff that happens and how quickly you need to be able to bounce onto something and how it all works, you know, like you meet a client and they're suddenly like, oh, well, actually, we could have space in, you know, our newsletter that comes out in 2 days. Could you turn something around that quickly? Yeah, you can turn around something that quickly because that's like a super expensive, you know, advertising opportunity. And suddenly you're doing 4 hours of overtime because you're creating, you know, the visuals, the writing, you're getting it approved, and oh, the approvals. Holy wow. You know, 50 rounds of approval, like 500 people who need to like what you've done. It's just, but like, it's not about ranting about what our old jobs were. It's just to give a bit of insight about how much external expectations and how stressful it all was on our nervous systems.
That's it. I think I was thinking that too, like this has turned into a bit of a rant, but it's not supposed to be. I guess it's like you said, if you know this industry, then you understand. But for people who don't, like maybe you're in a similar environment in a similar industry, or maybe not. And I think it is important to talk about, you know, our experience so that you can see how the journey has been from that to where we are now. And I think, like, just to add to what you were saying, when you talked about, like, you know, bringing the coffees, bringing the trays, you know, for the designers, I've worked on both sides. I've been a designer, but I've also been a project manager. And it's not just that you're asking the designer, because, you know, it's not specifically you, it's like everyone. And so, like, your client has asked you for this, and then you're asking your designer to stay late, which means that you then have to stay late because you need to wait for the work, and then also the person who approves it needs to stay. So it's like, it's a whole ripple effect. And I think when you take that into account, you realize how, like, it's not just you. Like, there's no way, because I don't know, maybe some people are listening thinking, but why didn't you just stop doing that? Why didn't you have boundaries? But it would have been very difficult to be like, sorry, I'm going to turn down all of this budget, you know, all of this, and say no to the client. just because I have boundaries. And I know that sounds like ridiculous, but that is what the environment teaches you.
Oh yeah, and you don't progress if you do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was hungry.
Yeah, that's it. So now, like, coming out of that, if you think about that in terms of what that, the effects that that had on our bodies, but also our mindset too. And I remember that, like, both of us at the beginning of our business journey, like, I was like, I want to do all the things, like, and then I was like, no, I don't have to do this. And so it was like this constant conversation in my head of like, am I lazy if I take a rest day? Or, you know, all of those things that you have learned, right?
Yeah, because that's like our baseline of how we work. And so that's the whole like unlearning and deconstructing how to work, because it's just like, oh, but I could do so much more. And like you said, like, does it mean that I'm lazy and I should do all of this before it's even asked of me? And you end up doing all this like completely unnecessary stuff that is then never asked of you, that you never use. Like, how many times did I do my client kit? I've never shared it.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's just not how I work.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of like, if someone asks me for something, then I'm like, oh, I've been thinking about doing that. Cool. Now I've got the invitation and now I do it. But it has been so hard to feel that sense of satisfaction.
Yeah.
You know, of like closing your computer at the end of the day and being like, oh yeah, I did a good job today. Being able to do that without working 12 hours and having your nervous system like completely wired all day, that's a huge unlearning thing to do, of being able to be satisfied with your work and even proud of what you're doing without it completely ruining you, because the two are so closely like assimilated and linked that, yeah. And I mean, I'm so grateful that I had you throughout it all, because how many times have you been like, yeah, but is that needed today? Or, you know, can you do it in a different way? And again, like back to our ease, like we always try to do things in a way that feels easeful, but it's just when you're so used to looking 50 steps ahead and in a year what's going to be needed, and having like, I don't know how many different PR kits had I had ready for the hotel, you know, like, and I mean, no one's ever asked me for a PR kit personally. So
Yeah.
if it's needed, I'll do it, you know, at the time, but there's no point in me putting the time and energy in doing it ahead of time. You know, I'll just do it the day that is needed. And yeah, needing that rest as well. Because like what we talk about today is us, you know. So it's the space that we comes from is so much more important in what we do today than when we were representing brands, clients, and a business that we were working in, you know.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest learnings has been, and I know that you do this as well, is when I first started my business and like creating content for my business, I used to like batch create and schedule my posts, and because that's what I did, you know, in for a job. And now I've really learned to lean into how I'm feeling when I'm posting it. And I know you feel the same, because it's like, it's your, because it's so personal, like our business is so personal to us, that I was finding when I am scheduling the content, by the time it came around to posting it like a week later, that didn't resonate anymore.
Yeah.
And so, but it's leaning into like, it's creating the space to then be able to create content that feels good, and that, you know, versus like thinking ahead. And it's like a different way of working.
Yeah. And yeah, actually we had a very different journey in that when you started your business, you really brought in like all that pushy energy and then deconstructed in it, whereas I went fully the other way, like too far the other way. And I was like, I don't want any structure, I don't want anything done ahead, but then it was just too boundaryless. Like it was just, yeah, I had absolutely zero structure, zero idea, basic. But I think I was so broken from all the past work experiences. I mean, it was really weird because I went through a big burnout like while I wasn't working, because with COVID, I had all that time off work. And it was in the not working that I crashed. Like it was like my body finally was like, oh, I can completely let go, and did it let go. But I went too far into that. And now I find that in business, I'm actually more supported when I create structure for myself, and I'm creating a structure that supports me. So then I can spend less time doing admin stuff and I can spend more time actually engaging with people. And it's not just easier for me, then it's actually easier for my clients as well. And that for me is really important too. So yeah, it's just finding, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's no like right or wrong way, and there's absolutely no linear way. It's just being aware of where you're at every step and having that moment. Like if you're working with a coach, it's even better because then you have that sounding board of being able to just be like, oh, okay, am I doing this out of resistance for how I used to do it, out of fear because I don't want to do it the same way? What's the energy that I'm bringing to what I'm doing? You know, like if you're creating like some kind of automations with your emails or with your calendar or something, what's the energy behind it? Are you creating it out of a lack mindset of, well, if I don't do this, I'm never going to have any clients and I'm never going to bring in any money? Or are you doing this out of a, actually, this would make like my life easier, my clients' lives easier. So I'm just going to sit down, cup of tea, work on all these systems, put it out, and then, you know, yeah, make everybody's lives more simple. So yeah, it's just like,
yeah. I think one of the things that has been most beneficial is like the ability to, I guess it's slowing down. It is creating space so that you can ask yourself those questions and feel into it. And I think what we didn't have in our careers was that time and that space to feel into it. So everything felt so rushed, and just I want to describe it as like it was like up here, like to my neck. It was like, you know, it's that feeling like everything does feel a bit forced, but that is what it is. Whereas I've learned to recognize that now in myself, and when I'm starting to feel up here again and like a bit kind of forced, I know that probably isn't in alignment, and
yeah,
how can I bring more ease into it?
Yeah. And also, I think we were talking about this recently. You know, you say when we were in our career, like you couldn't look at how things were.
Yeah.
And I think we started to. But the problem is when you start observing and noticing this stuff, you know, and I feel like this is quite like a big shift that's going on like at the moment for the past like 5 so years, and it's really moving, is people are doing all this personal work and getting into yoga, meditation, a bit as coping mechanisms, but still there's, you know, obviously benefits to it. The problem comes in when you start bringing that awareness into work, and then you start seeing how dissociated the way you work is, and that dissonance between what you've realized is good for your nervous system, what feels right. Like you now see the difference between your regulated self and your at work self. And that difference is where the pain is almost, because, and I feel like that's where the burnout happens, because you're suddenly like noticing that there's something wrong. And that's where a lot of people think, oh, I need to work part-time and that's going to help, or I need to work for myself and that's going to help. And unfortunately, what happens is that you work part-time, or you change jobs, or you do something, but you're still bringing that same energy and you're still receiving that same energy. Like it's not just the person.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't work. And then you do it again and you do it again and you keep fighting because you're like, I need to find a solution. And you're getting to that point where you're just more and more broken and or you go work for yourself. And this to me is the part that's the most heartbreaking, is you go work for yourself and you apply all those principles to working for yourself because that's the baseline that you're used to. And you most probably start by working with a business coach who tells you how to make your first 5K, 10K months, and that you need to post every day. And like, I can feel it. I don't feel right even saying those things. And it truly is heartbreaking for me, because people stop working in like the corporate space or for a business. They stop being an employee and they go and work for themselves, usually on something they're really passionate about, because that's what you do. And then that doesn't work, or they burn out doing their own thing because it's for them, they want to do even more. So it's really heartbreaking to me when people then go into working on their business, their passion, and it either doesn't work, or it works because they're pushing so much and then they completely burn out doing something that they love, and then they stop. And like, where do you go from there, And yeah, that just honestly breaks my heart. And it's something that I speak to a lot of clients about, of just how can we make this something that's sustainable for you. Maybe it's a slower start, maybe it's, and I actually don't believe that just because you're working less hours, I strongly don't believe that because you're working less hours or putting less strategies in place, that you're going to be making less money.
Yeah.
Because it's all about the energy that you bring to it. And imagine like the energy that you bring to your business, and not just like if your business is working with clients, like not just with your clients, but when you're working on your business, like behind the scenes and stuff, if the energy that you bring to that is full of excitement, joy, ease, flow, peace, like happiness, just a big like happy exhale, how good does it feel? And you can feel that. You 100% can feel that in the content that you read from a person, especially if they do like video or audio content. And even if it's a shop, like people will be like, oh, why did this shop work better than another, or like is more sustainable, like in time. It's just the energy that people bring to it. And so much healing can happen in that space,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even just to bring it back to perfectionism a little bit, when you have been working in that kind of environment where perfectionism is a thing and it's the norm, if you don't look at that and the reasons behind perfectionism, because essentially perfection doesn't exist, right? It's a concept. Like everyone has a different version of perfect, which means that it technically doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So what you're striving for, like, it isn't there, and so it will feel probably never good enough if that's what you're striving for, because your version will be different to someone else's, and it honestly can just go round and round in circles. And then that can lead to things like procrastination. If you're trying to have something that's perfect, but you have fear around what that's going to look like, or fear around the outcome, then that's where procrastination comes from often as well. So it's like all of these things that you might not realize has been picked up, like in that kind of hustle environment. You don't have time to really overanalyze that. You just make sure it's like perfect to the client, and then it is what it is. Whereas when you bring that into your business and you don't really look at the root of that, then that's where nothing will get done.
No, it's just like this destination that doesn't exist, you know, like just like when people start healing themselves and they think they're going to get to this place where everything's perfect, and then they get so disappointed when they don't get there, and they're like, I don't understand, I've been doing this for 5 years and I'm still nowhere near healed. You're like, yeah. There's no destination, like there's no perfect place, just like there's no perfect content, there's just no perfect business, there's no, and yeah, it just does not exist. And also, like, I just feel like I love it when you see the human mistakes behind, you just see the humanness behind something, you know. It just makes you have such a stronger link to it. And even from a marketing perspective, like how many times did we learn that you have to create like an emotional link to your client to be able to have them as part of like your core group? You do that by being human. And humanness is not perfect, and it ebbs and flows, and there's all these things that happen. But just like we're talking about, you know, whatever's going on through our minds and sharing like vulnerably like what's going through, that's what makes us human and more relatable as well. So
yeah, we don't want this podcast to be perfect. We want it to be messy. There's definitely going to be lots in here, but I mean, we hope that inspires. If you have a business and you've been thinking about starting a podcast, for example, like it doesn't have to be perfect.
Well, it can't be
perfect.
Just do it and go with like the messiness that it's going to be, and like pay attention to what you like listening to. Like we're doing it as a conversation that's just completely, you know, like unedited, and we just chat through it because that's just what we love listening to. Like we listen to these podcasts where the intros are absolutely messy and they just laugh through them, and they're the ones that we love. So just pay attention to what you like. And if it's something that you like listening to, then most probably you'll like creating it as well. And if you like the things that seem more perfect, pay attention to that as well. I just find like, yeah, okay, what's in there that makes you enjoy that? So
yeah,
but there is like, it can't be perfect because it won't be like you said, it won't be perfect to everyone. So just go for it and just do it. And I just wanted to touch on procrastination that you were talking on before, because it's been something that I've been on my mind a lot recently. And I know we've spoken about this, that I've, for me, realized that procrastination is not that linked to perfectionism to me. What I've seen is that actually when I'm procrastinating is because there's an uncomfortable emotion that's arising. And that might be, oh, I'm not good enough because I'm never going to make it perfect. But it can be something else. And it's actually the resistance to being with what's coming up for me when I'm doing that task that makes me procrastinate to not do it. And sometimes it's, oh, I'm not good enough, it's not going to be perfect. So then, but what I've noticed recently is a lot of the time is, oh, I'm going to be seen. And that scares me in a way. And so then I find myself, you know, sitting down, starting to write something. And then 5 minutes later, I'm in the kitchen and I'm like, how did I get here? And it's because I'm avoiding the uncomfortable emotion that is coming up for me when I think I'm going to be seen like more authentically. But then I'm able to have that chat with myself of being like, yeah, but that's your value. Like you want to be authentic and I want to be vulnerable and to share myself in that way. And being able to notice, oh, okay, that's scary for me, so I'm going to need to hold my hand through this a little bit more. And maybe a lot of the time recently it's been, if I share like a big, long, vulnerable post, for example, then I just give myself like all afternoon to write it. And I've got to write it in 2 languages. So I'm like in there twice, like there's no avoiding it. You're going through the ringer 2 times, because I actually like completely rewrite it then in French. And so I just have a lot more compassion for myself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, it's going to take you all afternoon, and you're going to need like 5 million tea breaks. And you're going, like, I feel like a lot of those times I realize, oh, I need to be dressed more comfortably, and I need to snuggle up on my couch and feel like all held and supported, with pillows and blankets. But then I can feel myself like do that exhale, and like my nervous system calms down, and I'm like, until I press publish, no one sees this. So just write it, and it's going to be cathartic, but it's going to be uncomfortable, but it doesn't need to be painful, and you don't need to push through this. You can hold yourself through this. And then it's like doing the things for your business actually participate in your growth and your healing as well, rather than hinder it and go against it. So
yeah, it's like using the kind of deconditioning journey for your healing as well, and sharing that with others for their healing journey too. And I think that's a really good experiment for any area of business as well. It is really kind of leaning into that uncomfortable feeling and asking where it's coming from, because often I personally feel that hustle culture is really linked to self-worth, and that's been my journey as well. And it's, why do we hustle? For me, it was proving that I'm good enough, like proving that I deserve a promotion, proving that I deserve a pay rise, proving that I'm good at what I do. And so often when I feel myself rushing to do something, I ask why I'm doing that. And it often is related to that. It's, well, if I don't do this quickly, then I'm not a good business owner, or whatever that thing is related to. And that's self-worth. And so it's all so linked.
It really is. Like there's no like your business version or your employee version or your work version of yourself and it's all the one person. And of course one's gonna mirror the other side of you. It's just like facets, and but it's those times where you realize like how your healing journey, like on a personal note, then affects how you approach business. And also if you work with a coach or follow courses and stuff, what you learn in that then applies to your personal life, and how the two just obviously link to you. So it's just, what a ride.
It is a ride. It really, really is a ride. And I mean, that's our intention with this podcast, is to show all of that ride, share our experience and what we've been through, what we're going through. And it's I just remember like the very early stages of the business that I run now. It was all of that, all of these thoughts coming up, all of those patterns and behaviors that were very linked to all of my limiting beliefs and all of my fears. And I didn't, until I worked with a coach, I didn't know what they were, and I didn't know how they were affecting me. But then you kind of go into like a rabbit hole of, oh, okay, well, this is linked to this, and this is linked to this, and this is linked to this, and like even further back. And then you actually see how it affects so many other areas of your life, not just business. It's relationships, it's money, it's all of that. And this business journey, although it is uncomfortable and it is a ride, but it is also a beautiful healing journey. And yeah,
I love that we get to do it together.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I just wanted, like, because we said we would share vulnerably, like, as we're going through it. I just want to share quickly to like people listening. So at the moment, I'm trying to figure out what my offers are going to be next year. And as we're recording this, it's the last day of 2022. And so, there's all that like, oh, you've got to start the year with like packages. And I've just been certified like a month ago. I got a certification that I've been working on for like 9 months. So it's just like, I can finally use those coaching modalities. And so it changes like what I'm going to offer. And I've had ideas like 2-3 times about what they're going to be. And at the time they feel great. And I'm like, yep, tomorrow I'm working on them. And then there's just something that does not feel right. And sometimes it's limiting beliefs. I was like, oh, I can't charge that much. And then I get text from M telling me like, I can do whatever the fuck I want. But there's also like, I can feel that there's a little bit of movement that needs to happen. And I need to allow myself a little bit more time for something to land with a bit more clarity. And that feels more right. There's just something about it. And I'm like, oh, maybe I just create like a very simple offer and then allow my clients to indicate to me what they need and then create an offer based on that. And that's like coming back to that, not always anticipating what people might want and then trying to push it onto them, and just being that quiet space, not necessarily quiet, but just that big space, spaciousness of where you're able to listen to what's coming through, and then you can respond to that, which you as a projector, you definitely know about. So
yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that, because that you as a manager is respond, like that's what you're supposed to do.
So just to in business by our
Design.
we'll
Yeah
whole app just on business with design. But
I what for me, what you were just saying there is almost challenging. Well, it's challenging what you think that you should do, or what you think that you should do, which is from your experience with your background is, it's the start of the new year. Well, we need our January offers, we need to have the whole year planned out and all of this. And so of course, like, to challenge that is going to feel a little bit sticky. And also just like you know yourself, and to trust yourself, and it will come through when it's ready, and you've been leaning into that, and it's
uncomfortable. I definitely have but if I don't put out the perfect offer, then I'm not going to make any money. And beyond the money stuff, it's like, but what's the best way that I could serve my clients? And sometimes I just get caught up in this mindset or this like thought pattern of, but the best way to serve my clients is to have all of this ready for them. So in between when they book their first call and when we actually have the first call, they can have access to all this content, and they should have all of this. And even just thinking about it, I'm like exhausted, and well, maybe what's best for, and every time I come back to this, what's best for my client and how I can best serve my clients and the community, like beyond that, is the space from which I come from. And for that to be grounded and peaceful and full of love and authenticity, then I need to be that. And I need a lot of space to be able to come from that place. It's not about the pre-recorded content that I can share. It's about who I am when I show up. And maybe I show up less, and maybe I'm less accessible. But when I'm there, I'm there. I'm not thinking about anything else. That time that I'm with people, I'm fully there. And it's hard to always, I have to, it's like, well, it's not hard actually. It just has to be a conscious, constant reminder of this is what you're doing. These are your values. This is your overall vision. And this is how you're going to do it. But it's so easy to get caught in the, yes, but if I have a perfect offer and a perfect launch plan and a perfect marketing strategy behind it, then I'm going to get this many clients, what's going to bring this many.
Yeah. But it's also coming back to the worth thing. It's like, I guess we're so used to, you mentioned it earlier, like, what else can I do for my clients? Like, add on these 5 videos, and it's like, and what else, and what else? And like, just with one session that you give your client now is going to provide so much value, and it's kind of just trusting that and leaning into that, and like you said, responding when it comes up, and knowing that that's enough, but a constant reminder of that versus like, and what else, and what else, and I can't launch this offer until I have all of this stuff. And that I think applies to so many people and so many stages of business as well, right?
Yeah, because like, how am I going to tell a client that they're inherently enough if I don't live that? Then it's hypocritical. And I don't want to be a hypocrite.
Yeah. I think where I'm at the moment is kind of similar in terms of like, I've been battling with I need to have loads of content ready for the new year tomorrow. But then also like my mind is like just a little bit foggy in the way that like I'm also transitioning in my business, and so where before I might have kind of forced the ideas out, I'm really kind of just leaning in. Like, if I'm feeling foggy, then that's because I need to find clarity, and I need to like, kind of just lean into that and sit on that. And I think for both of us, that has been a really big lesson, like learning not to force things, but learning to lean in, and almost, well, in your case, like waiting to respond, and in my case as a projector, waiting for invitations. But also like, that's not to say, because I was just thinking as you were talking, that's not saying that you're not doing anything. And for me, that's not saying I'm not doing anything. There's a difference between what you were saying earlier about like going the opposite way of masculine energy, action taking, and just like leaning completely into your feminine. You do need both, and for both of us, we have got our things going on, like our structure in our business, but what we're talking about now is creating new offers in addition to that. So, and I think that is quite an important distinction to make. It's like leaning into the space when you need it, but also setting yourself up for success in other areas as well, to give you space to lean in.
Creating like that solid foundation that you can then build upon. And that's what I'm feeling at the moment, is just what I love to do is long form writing. I'm just doing more of that, and that feels really good, even though sometimes it's so vulnerable that I have to really hold my hand through it. But I'm sharing from my heart, and that feels more real. And there's so much trust that you need to have to be able to, lean into that. But I think, well, that's a muscle that I'm much more interested in developing,
and even just that, like viewing it, that's a mindset shift as well, as like viewing it as a muscle that you strengthen, versus like, oh, I don't have that ability, so
it's just, well, I'm gonna trust a little bit more. And it's like you said, it's not doing nothing. It's just like, I guess if you've got to attach it to doing work, you're working on yourself and you're working on your space. And that comes with a lot of awareness, like self-awareness, consciousness, and just like processing what's there, what's sticky, what needs to move. Like, I've realized a lot of the time when it feels like hard to write like that, I write from my standing desk because I'm like dancing throughout it, because I feel it in my body, like the discomfort. I'm like, oh, I need to like move it out. And so I have like 5 million dance breaks throughout the day. And then I come back and I write it. And then it feels uncomfortable again. And then I move through it again. And then I, and it's just.
Yeah, I love that. It's like shifting the energy so that.
Yeah, and I'm like shifting it as it moves, like.
Yeah.
And not just in a, oh, I don't want to feel them pushing it away. It's not like really giving it space for those energies to be in motions, to just like let the emotions take space in your body and to move and to exist. Like you just welcome them and you're like, oh, you're here. Okay. And sometimes like you don't know what the emotion is, but you just feel into the energy of it and like, oh, I need stillness or I need movement, and you just flow through all of that. But it's just, like all that to say that there's no, sorry, we're not here to give you like, here's the 3 ways to deconstruct your relationship to work and 5 ways to heal it. Nah.
For everyone, like it would be a complete lie for us to just do that, right? It's we can only share our experience and what works for us and how we help others too, but also we help from a place of you need to feel into it, and we're there to support and guide, but really everyone is different. We can't tell you what to do.
No, we can just lead by example and share from experience.
Oh, I think that's a good place to end. I just wanted to share something that I was just thinking about as you were talking about dancing, and it was just like this funny image of you working in luxury hotels, like, and imagine if you had just done that, just like dancing.
I'm pretty sure I did, and my colleagues were just like, that's the behind the scenes version of me. And then there's like in front of the clients, when I worked I always wore heels. I haven't worn heels in years, like really high stilettos and perfect hair and makeup and and then you arrive back on house and you're like
that's funny. I love it.
At your desk. Oh, fun times. All right, well, thanks for listening.
Thank you. See you next week for another episode.
See you next week. Thank you for tuning in to your weekly dose of witchy business.
If you love us as much as we love us, please leave a 5-star review to help us spread the magic.
Thank you again to our sponsor, Plan Her. Please support them the way they support us.
And don't forget to follow the link in the show notes to sign up to our Substack. You can also watch us on YouTube. It's at Witchy Business.
And you can also follow us on Instagram at We Are Witchy Business. Emily is at _Emily Tyson, and I am at Anna.Jordan with an E.